The crimson sun of Zarath Prime bled across the horizon like a wound that refused to close. Ravenna Stormborn stood at the edge of her balcony, her powerful frame silhouetted against the dying light, and watched the capital city sprawl beneath her like a glittering cage. The wind carried the scent of metallic dust and burning plasma from the industrial sectors, far below, mingling with the sharp ozone tang of the weather control systems. Her sea-green hair, normally braided tight for combat, hung loose around her shoulders. A rare indulgence, a small rebellion. In 72 hours, that rebellion would end. The Council's ultimatum had been delivered that morning by Elder Thasian himself, his ancient face creased with what might have been sympathy. Might have been. With the Kaiar, emotion was always secondary to function sentiment, buried beneath the weight of duty and tradition. The Elder had stood in this very chamber, his ceremonial robes rustling against the polished floor, and delivered the words that would reshape her entire existence. Choose a mate before the annual summit champion Ravenna, or accept the arranged bond with first strategist Zarek Coldsteel. The Council will not permit further delay. Your house requires stability. The Northern Alliance requires this union. You have 72 hours to comply. Ravenna's amber eyes narrowed at the memory. Her hands, crimson skin gleaming in the fading light, gripped the balcony rail hard enough that the reinforced metal groaned under the pressure. Zarek Coldsteel, first strategist of the Northern Houses, brilliant, calculating, and colder than the void between stars. He would make her a weapon, a trophy, a political tool to expand his influence across 3 sectors, consolidating power through her reputation and military achievements, just as they had made her mother. The memory came unbidden, as it always did when the walls closed in. Her mother, Serena Stormborn, tall and fierce like all Kaiar females, standing in this very chamber 30 years ago. Ravenna had been young then, barely 11 solar cycles, but she remembered the day her mother had been informed of her arranged marriage to Lord Vex of House Ironvale, remembered the way something vital had flickered and died behind her mother's eyes. The light had gone out slowly, year by year, as the political marriage ground her down, as she became nothing but a hollow shell, wearing the colors of House Ironvale, her own identity subsumed by her husband's ambitions. Ravenna had been 11 when her mother stopped speaking entirely, stopped eating anything but the bare minimum required to survive, stopped training, stopped fighting, stopped being the warrior she'd once been. 13 when they found her body in the Eastern Garden, the ceremonial blade still clutched in her hand, blood soaking into the imported earth flowers she'd planted in a futile attempt to create something beautiful in her cage. Never again. The words had become Ravenna's mantra, her driving force. She would not be caged, would not be broken, would not let them strip away her identity and remake her into someone's political asset. But Kaiar law was absolute, built on centuries of tradition that valued collective stability over individual autonomy. Females of the warrior caste were expected to form alliances through strategic marriages, their choices dictated by house needs and political necessity. Refusing outright was impossible. The Council had the authority to enforce arranged marriages if the participants proved unwilling. She'd seen it happen to other females of her generation. Watch them dragged to bonding ceremonies they'd never chosen, their objections overruled by elders who valued tradition above consent. But there was one loophole, one ancient ritual that even the Council couldn't override: the Gauntlet of Claim. Ravenna turned from the balcony and strode into her chambers. The room was vast walls paneled with black volcanic glass imported from the mining colonies of Zarath's southern continent. The glass reflected her image back at her in fractured pieces, a tall, powerful figure wrapped in the crimson and green of House Crimson Helm. She looked at herself, really looked. 31 solar cycles old, champion of House Crimson Helm, undefeated in 73 arena challenges. The most feared warrior in 4 systems, with a kill count that included 3 separate assassination attempts by rival houses, and completely, utterly trapped by the very traditions that had elevated her to power. The Gauntlet of Claim was her only option, an ancient ritual rarely invoked where a female warrior could select her own mate by combat trial. The rules were simple and brutal. She would enter the arena. She would fight, and if a male survived her ceremonial bite, the venom injection that sealed the blood claim, he would be hers by Kaiar law. Unbreakable, absolute. No council could override it. No arranged marriage could supersede it. The problem was that her bite had killed 15 candidates over the past decade. Ravenna moved to the weapons wall, her fingers trailing across the hilts of various blades. Each one held memories of victories, of enemies defeated, of challenges met and overcome. But none of them could help her with this. Her venom was particularly potent even among Kaiar females. The symbiotic nanites in her saliva designed to create the biological bond between mates were aggressive, deadly. The medical reports called it a genetic anomaly inherited from her maternal line. She called it a curse. The nanites were supposed to integrate with a male's biology, enhancing his physical capabilities, while creating a dependency that bound him to his mate. Survival rates for Kaiar males were roughly 60% high enough that the gauntlet remained a viable option for most females. But Ravenna's nanites were different, hyper-aggressive. They attacked the host system with such intensity that most bodies simply couldn't adapt fast enough. 15 males had died in the attempt, some within seconds. Others had lasted hours, their systems shutting down organ by organ as the nanites overwhelmed their biology. The last one had been 3 years ago. A promising warrior from House Shadowforge, strong and healthy with genetic markers that suggested high compatibility. He'd lasted 6 hours before his nervous system collapsed. Ravenna had sat beside his medical pod watching the monitors flatline and sworn she'd never invoke the gauntlet again. But she was out of options. She pulled up her personal display, accessing the arena's current roster of fighters. The dust pits, as the locals called them, were Zerath Prime's primary gladiatorial complex, a massive underground facility where captured soldiers, criminals, and volunteers fought for entertainment and the slim chance of earning their freedom. The roster showed 237 active fighters. Most were Kaiar males from minor houses seeking glory or death. A few were from other species, Vex traders who'd defaulted on debts, Tarkanian mercenaries captured during border conflicts, even a handful of humans taken during the recent skirmishes at the edge of Kaiar territory. Humans. Ravenna paused, her attention caught by one particular file. Devlin Cross, human, male, age 32. Former military, United States Marine Corps Special Forces designation. Captured during Incident 7734 at the border of Sector 9. Combat record: 3 months in the dust pits, survived 18 individual matches, including 3 that medical teams had flagged as unsurvivable. She pulled up his fight footage, watched him move through opponents with a style that was completely alien to Kaiar combat doctrine. Where Kaiar warriors relied on superior strength and overwhelming force, this human used speed, deception, environmental exploitation. He won fights he should have lost by refusing to engage on his opponent's terms, by turning their expectations against them, by adapting to each new threat with a creativity that bordered on reckless. In his most recent match, he'd been facing a Kaiar warrior twice his size armed with plasma weapons, while he had only a crude metal rod. The Kaiar had every advantage. And yet the human had won by triggering a controlled explosion in the arena's power conduits, using the momentary disruption to close distance and deliver a decisive strike to a vulnerable joint in his opponent's armor. Unconventional, chaotic, brilliant. Ravenna watched the footage 3 more times, her tactical mind analyzing every movement, every decision. This human didn't fight to prove his strength. He fought to survive. And survival required adaptability, creativity, the ability to see possibilities where others saw only obstacles. He was exactly what she needed. She made the arrangements within the hour. The gauntlet would be invoked tomorrow evening. The arena masters would select their best fighters for the preliminary rounds, warriors who could test a challenger's endurance, skill, and will. And at the end, when those fighters had been defeated or withdrawn, she would enter the arena herself for the final challenge. The human would be there. She would make certain of it. Ravenna spent the rest of the night in meditation, preparing her mind and body for what was to come. The gauntlet was more than just combat. It was a declaration, a public statement that she was choosing her own path, rejecting the council's authority to dictate her future. Every major house would send representatives to witness. The decision would be analyzed, debated, used as ammunition by her political enemies. Zarek would be furious. Good. Let him be. Let him rage and plot and scheme. By this time tomorrow, she would have claimed a mate, and there would be nothing he could do about it. As dawn broke over Zerath Prime, Ravenna, dressed in her ceremonial armor, crimson plates edged with silver, the colors of House Crimson Helm, polished to mirror brightness. She braided her sea-green hair in the traditional warrior style, each plait a declaration of rank and achievement. 73 braids, 73 victories. By tonight, there would be one more, or there would be nothing at all. Across the city in the bowels of the arena complex, known as the dust pits, another kind of preparation was unfolding. Devlin Cross leaned against the cold stone wall of his holding cell and tried to remember what fresh air tasted like. Not the recycled metallic tang of the underground chambers. Not the blood and sweat stench of the arena floor that had seemed to permeate every surface. Real air, earth air, pine trees and morning dew, and the particular quality of light that came through the mountains of Colorado at dawn filtered through thin atmosphere to paint everything in shades of gold and blue. That life was gone. Had been gone for 6 months now, though time had a strange quality down here. Days blurred together into an endless cycle of waiting, fighting, surviving. 6 months since his reconnaissance unit had been ambushed at the edge of Kayar territory during what was supposed to be a routine patrol. A border skirmish that the official histories would probably forget if they bothered to record it at all. 3 men had died in the first volley. Martinez Chen and the kid whose name Devlin could never remember, the replacement, who'd been with them less than a week. 2 more during the chaotic retreat through hostile terrain. Williams took a plasma bolt to the chest and Rodriguez bled out from a leg wound before they could get him to evac. Devlin had been the only one captured alive, dragged unconscious across the stars to this frontier world to die for the entertainment of beings who barely considered humans worthy of notice. Except he refused to die. The cell door ground open with the particular metallic shriek that served as the only alarm clock gladiators needed. 2 Kayar guards stood in the opening, males smaller than the females, but still imposing at nearly 6.5 feet tall, their crimson skin marked with the geometric tattoos of the arena security forces. They didn't speak. They never did. Just gestured with their shock batons for him to move. Devlin pushed himself upright, his body protesting the movement. He'd fought yesterday, or was it the day before? Time was slippery down here. A quick match against a vexed traitor who'd thought superior reach would be enough. It hadn't been. But the fight had left Devlin with cracked ribs that the medical teams had barely bothered to treat, a gash along his temple that still wept blood when he moved too quickly, and burns on his forearms from a plasma whip some bastard had gotten lucky with 2 days prior. He walked, because refusing meant the shock batons, and the batons meant he had entered the arena already weakened. He'd learned to pick his battles. The corridor sloped upward toward the sound. The roar of the crowd was a living thing vibrating through stone and bone. 20,000 Kayar voices screaming for blood, for spectacle, for the particular brand of violence that the Gauntlet of Claim provided. Devlin had heard about the Gauntlet from other fighters, a ritual where Kayar females entered the arena to select mates through combat. The preliminary rounds were always brutal, designed to test candidates to their absolute limits before the claiming female even showed herself. Most fighters considered it an honor to be selected, a chance at elevation from slave to consort, from disposable to protected. But the whispers also spoke of the mortality rate, of the venom bite that killed more often than it bonded, of males who survived the combat only to die screaming as their biology rejected the forced integration. Devlin wanted no part of it. The prep chamber was barely large enough to turn around and lit by a single flickering plasma lamp that cast everything in shades of red and shadow. A weapons rack held the standard loadouts, shock batons, plasma knives, neural disruptors, all designed to incapacitate rather than kill, to make the fights last longer, to give the crowd their spectacle. Devlin ignored them all. He'd learned quickly that in the arena the best weapon was unpredictability. He grabbed a length of razor wire instead, wrapping it carefully around his left forearm. Crude, nasty, effective against opponents who expected more sophisticated tools. Added a small EMP grenade to his belt, technically against regulations, but the guards never checked human fighters as carefully. They didn't expect humans to understand Kayar technology well enough to weaponize it. Their mistake. The announcer's voice boomed through the stone, amplified by systems Devlin didn't understand but had learned to hate. Citizens of Zarath, tonight we witness history. The champion of House Crimson Helm, the Crimson Storm herself, invokes the ancient right of the Gauntlet of Claim. The crowd's roar doubled, tripled. The sound was physical, a pressure wave that pushed against Devlin's chest. He knew what that meant. Every gladiator did. The Gauntlet of Claim. a female warrior entering the arena to select a mate through trial by combat. It was supposed to be an honor, a chance at freedom. But Devlin had seen too many broken bodies carried out of this arena to believe in honor anymore. The preliminary trials begin now. 4 warriors will face the champion's tests. Survival earns the right to be claimed. Failure earns only death. 4 warriors. Devlin's stomach dropped. The usual gauntlet format. 4 increasingly difficult opponents to test endurance, skill, tactical thinking, and will. He'd watched 3 gauntlets during his time here. Watched strong fighters reduced to broken meat. Watched the claiming bites kill within seconds. He didn't want to be here. The gate before him began to rise, light spilling into the prep chamber like liquid gold. The arena floor beyond was covered in synthetic crimson sand kicked up by massive ventilation systems into a fine glittering haze that caught the lights and turned everything into a blood-red dream. The crowd was a wall of sound, a pressure that pushed against his eardrums and made his pulse thunder. Devlin stepped into the light because there was no other choice. Refusing meant immediate execution. Fighting meant a chance, however slim, to survive another day. The arena was massive, carved from the bedrock of Zarath itself over the course of a century. Tiered seating rose in steep angles on all sides, packed with Kaiar citizens in their house colors, crimson and gold, silver and black, green and bronze. Holographic displays showed his face magnified 100 times, along with statistics that made his chest tighten. Probability of survival 12%. Expected time to incapacitation 4.3 minutes. The crowd was already jeering, dismissing him. Just another human. Weak, fragile, easy prey. Good. Let them underestimate. The announcer's voice cut through the noise. The first trial endurance, the human challenger faces the flash storm. A compartment opened in the arena wall. What emerged looked like a floating sphere, maybe 3 feet in diameter, covered in what appeared to be camera lenses. Devlin's military training kicked in immediately. Flashbang delivery system, designed to disorient, to test how fighters responded when their primary senses were compromised. The sphere activated without warning. Light exploded across his vision, so bright it seared through his closed eyelids. Sound followed, a high-pitched screech calibrated to Kaiar hearing ranges, but still devastating to human ears. Devlin dropped it, rolled, used the movement to put distance between himself and his last position. The crowd's roar told him he'd moved in time to avoid whatever follow-up attack the system had deployed. His vision was returning in spots and flashes. The sphere was tracking him, preparing another burst. Devlin grabbed a handful of the crimson sand, threw it hard at what he hoped was the sphere's sensor array. The sand cloud disrupted its targeting for maybe 2 seconds. 2 seconds was enough. He was on it, razor wire unwinding from his arm, wrapping around the sphere's equator, where the lenses clustered thickest. One hard yank and something inside cracked. The sphere's hum changed pitch, destabilizing. Devlin dove away as it detonated in a shower of sparks and shattered components. The crowd's jeer turned to surprised approval. He'd survived Trial 1. Barely. Trial 2, pain tolerance, the venom strike. Another compartment. This time what emerged was worse. A mechanical snake, maybe 10 feet long, its body segmented metal plating that moved with disturbing organic fluidity. At its head, visible even from 30 feet away, were injection needles designed to deliver neurotoxin. Kaiar neurotoxin, designed for Kaiar biology, but effective enough on humans to shut down the nervous system in minutes. The snake struck fast, faster than anything that size should move. Devlin barely got his arm up in time, taking the bite on his already burned forearm instead of his throat. Pain exploded through him, white-hot and all-consuming. The toxin was already working, trying to hijack his nervous system to paralyze him for the kill. But human biology was chaotic, unpredictable. Evolution had built redundancies and backups into every system designed to handle threats through sheer stubborn refusal to quit. Where Kaiar physiology was efficient and optimized, human bodies were messy and adaptive. Devlin felt the toxin spreading, felt his left arm go numb, his vision start to blur. But his right arm still worked. His legs still responded. He grabbed the snake behind its head, squeezed hard enough to hear servos grind. With his last functional hand, he triggered the EMP grenade at his belt and shoved it into the snake's open mouth. The explosion wasn't large, just enough to fry the internal electronics. The snake went limp, crashing to the sand. Devlin went to one knee, breathing hard, fighting to stay conscious as his body struggled to process the neurotoxin. The Kaiar medical teams would have anti-venom. They'd inject him before the next round. They wanted the fights to last, wanted the spectacle. His vision was graying at the edges when the med drones finally arrived. Trial 3 Resilience, the bone breaker. No, he needed more time. His system was still fighting the toxin, his left arm completely dead, his ribs screaming with every breath. But the arena didn't care about fair. The arena cared about spectacle. What emerged was Kaiar. Male, massive, easily 7 feet tall and built like a tank. Heavy armor covered his vitals, and in his hands was a kinetic hammer designed to shatter bone and pulp organs. The crowd roared approval. This was what they came to see. Superior strength, overwhelming force. Devlin barely had time to stand before the bone breaker charged. The impact when it came was like being hit by a freight train. The hammer caught Devlin's ribs already cracked from previous fights, and he felt something give. Felt the sharp stab of bone fragments grinding against each other. Felt his breath punch out in a gasp that tasted like blood. He hit the arena wall hard enough to leave a dent. Through the pain, through the haze of toxin and trauma, Devlin's tactical mind kept working. The bone breaker was strong, but strength required mass. Mass required momentum, and momentum could be redirected. The next charge came fast. Devlin waited until the last possible second, then dropped and rolled. The hammer hit the wall where he'd been standing, cracking the reinforced stone. In that moment of overextension, Devlin struck. Not with strength, he had none. With precision. The razor wire still wrapped around his functional arm lashed out at the bone breaker's ankle joint, where armor met flesh. The wire bit deep. The Kaiar roared, stumbled. Not falling his balance was too good for that, but off-center. Vulnerable. Devlin used the wall to launch himself up and forward, every movement agony through his shattered ribs, and delivered a desperate strike to the one weak point in heavy armor, the visual sensor array on the helmet. His fist connected with enough force to crack the lenses, send feedback through the systems. The bone breaker swung blind, and Devlin had already dropped, rolling under the wild arc of the hammer. He swept the leg he'd already damaged, using every ounce of his remaining strength. This time the Kaiar fell. The crowd went absolutely insane. Devlin stood over the fallen opponent, breathing in ragged gasps that sent spikes of agony through his chest, and tried not to pass out. 3 trials, 3 survivals, 3 times he should have died. And now came the claiming. The arena lights dimmed, the crowd's roar shifted, became something else. Anticipation, hunger. The display screens flickered, showing a single word in Kaiar script that Devlin had learned to recognize. Champion. She entered from the grand gate at the arena's north end, and Devlin's first thought was that she looked like violence made flesh. Ravenna Stormborn was tall, easily 6'2", her body wrapped in ceremonial armor that gleamed crimson and silver under the arena lights. Her skin was the deep red of Kaiar females, marked with the ceremonial tattoos of a champion warrior. Her sea-green hair, elaborately braided, moved with her like living water. Amber eyes, predatory and intense, scanned the arena and fixed on him with a focus that made every survival instinct scream. This was death. Beautiful, powerful, inevitable death. She began to walk toward him. Not running, not charging, just walking with the absolute confidence of an apex predator that had never encountered anything it couldn't kill. Each step was measured, deliberate. The crowd fell silent, sensing the weight of this moment. Devlin didn't run. There was nowhere to go. The arena walls were 20 feet high, smooth, impossible to climb with his injuries. The gates were sealed. His only option was to face her with his broken ribs and dead arm and rapidly depleting energy reserves. He was going to die here, but he'd die on his feet. Ravenna stopped 10 feet away, close enough that he could see the intricate details of her armor, the way the light caught on the edges of her braids. When she spoke, her voice was amplified by her helmet systems carrying across the silent arena. Human. Just that, one word. But the weight behind it was immense. Judgment, assessment, curiosity. Devlin met her eyes and said nothing. Words were wasted on inevitability. She tilted her head, studying him like a specimen. You survived 3 trials. Impressive for your species. But can you survive me? He still didn't answer. just shifted his stance, trying to find a position that didn't make his ribs scream, trying to identify any possible advantage in an equation that had none. Ravenna moved. She was faster than anything that size had a right to be. One moment 10 feet away, the next inside his guard, her armored hand clamping around his throat with enough force to cut off his air. She lifted him effortlessly, his feet dangling above the sand, and pulled him close until they were eye to eye. "You fight well," she said quietly, just for him. "You refuse to quit, even when quit is the logical choice. That stubbornness, that defiance, I respect it." Devlin's vision was starting to gray from lack of oxygen. He grabbed at her wrist with his functional hand, knowing it was useless. She could break his neck with a thought. But respect is not mercy. She threw him. Devlin hit the sand hard, rolled, came up gasping. His ribs were definitely broken now, shifting with each breath in ways that bones weren't meant to shift. He tasted blood, a lot of blood. Ravenna was already moving, closing distance, giving him no time to recover. Devlin scrambled back, grabbed a handful of sand, threw it at her face. Not to hurt, that was impossible. To buy seconds. She paused, wiping the sand from her eyes, and he saw it. The slight curve of her lips. Amusement. She was enjoying this. The next exchange was brutal. Ravenna came at him with overwhelming force, each strike powerful enough to kill. Devlin dodged, redirected, used her momentum against her in ways that would have worked against a human opponent. Against a Kaiar champion, it just delayed the inevitable. She caught him mid-dodge, her hand closing around his shoulder. The armor's strength enhancement made her grip unbreakable. She pulled him close again, and this time there was something different in her eyes. Not just predatory focus. Decision. "You'll do," she said. Then everything changed. Ravenna spun him, his back against her front, her arm across his chest, pinning him in place. Her other hand tilted his head, exposing his throat. Devlin struggled, adrenaline spiking through his exhausted system because he knew what was coming. Had heard the stories, the claiming bite, the venom that killed 9 times out of 10. He was about to become number 16. "I'm sorry," Ravenna whispered against his ear, quiet enough that only he could hear. "But I need you to survive." Her teeth sank into his neck. The pain was immediate and all-consuming. Not a tearing wound, the Kaiar ceremonial bite was precise, almost surgical. Her teeth penetrated the muscle just above his collarbone, finding the carotid artery with practiced accuracy. But it was what came after the bite that destroyed him. Venom, hot like liquid fire, injected directly into his bloodstream. Devlin felt it spread, felt the alien nanites flood his system like an invasion force. His biology tried to fight, tried to reject, but the nanites were designed for this. Engineered over millennia to overwhelm resistance, to rewrite host biology at the cellular level. His body went rigid. Every muscle locked, tendons standing out like cables beneath his skin. A sound escaped him that wasn't quite a scream, raw and animal, as the venom hit his nervous system and set every nerve ending on fire simultaneously. Through the haze of pain, he felt Ravenna's arms tighten around him. Not to hurt, to hold. To support his weight as his legs gave out and consciousness started to slip. The last thing he heard was the crowd's roar. Victory, celebration. The announcement echoing through his fading awareness. The champion Ravenna has made her claim, the vow of the blood. Claim has been sealed. Then darkness took him, and Devlin Cross knew nothing at all. He woke to softness. That was wrong. Wrong enough that it pulled him from unconsciousness despite every instinct screaming to stay under, to hide from whatever new horror awaited. In the dust pits, nothing was soft. Stone floors, metal bunks, rough fabric that abraded skin. Softness meant something had changed, and change in captivity was never good. Devlin's eyes opened slowly, fighting through the residual effects of whatever had knocked him out. Not the bite he remembered, that with crystal clarity remembered the burning venom and the feeling of his body being rewritten from the inside. But after the bite, nothing. Just darkness and pain and the vague sense of being moved, transported, laid down somewhere that smelled clean. The room came into focus gradually. Vast, easily 3 times the size of his holding cell, walls paneled with something black and reflective, volcanic glass maybe. The ceiling was high, supported by elegant arches that suggested this was a private residence rather than a prison. Lights embedded in the walls provided soft illumination that didn't hurt his eyes. And the bed. He was on an actual bed, not a metal slab or stone bench. A bed with what felt like real fabric sheets, soft pillows, the kind of comfort he hadn't experienced in 6 months. Devlin sat up slowly, waiting for pain. His ribs should have been screaming. The neurotoxin should have left him weak. The burns on his arms should have been agony. Instead, he felt better, not healed exactly, but functional. The pain was muted, distant, like it was happening to someone else. His hand went automatically to his neck, to the bite wound. His fingers found a biosynthetic patch, warm to the touch. Underneath, he could feel the wound, but it wasn't bleeding. Wasn't even particularly painful. Just hot. Intensely, unnaturally hot, like something was actively working beneath his skin. The nanites, they were already rewriting his biology. Devlin pulled his hand back and looked around the room more carefully. His combat instincts, dulled by months of captivity, but never gone cataloged exits, potential weapons, tactical positions. One door currently closed. Windows, but they showed a cityscape far below. He was high up in some kind of tower. No visible guards, but that didn't mean he was unobserved. On a table beside the bed, someone had left clothes. Not the rough prison garb he'd been wearing. Actual clothes, a soft tunic and pants in dark colors. Crimson and green. House colors, he realized. Her house colors. The claiming had been real. Memory returned in fragments. The arena, the trials, the champion walking toward him like death incarnate. The bite, the venom, the crowd's roar as she'd claimed him. Devlin Cross was no longer a gladiator. He was a consort, property of a different kind. The door opened. She entered without knocking because this was her space and she had no need to ask permission. Ravenna Stormborn, no longer in arena armor, but dressed in flowing robes that somehow made her look even more imposing. Without the helmet, he could see her face fully for the first time. Strong features, elegant bone structure, those amber eyes that seemed to look through him rather than at him. She stopped just inside the door, her gaze sweeping over him with clinical assessment. "You're awake. Good. The medical team's estimated another 6 hours. Your recovery speed is unexpected." Devlin's voice came out rough, damaged from the scream he'd released when the venom hit. "Where am I?" "My private chambers. You've been unconscious for 18 hours. She moved further into the room, graceful despite her size. "Your body accepted the nanites. You survived the claiming. How many don't?" Something flickered across her face. "Most." "How many?" Her jaw tightened. 15 candidates before you. All dead. You're the first to survive in a decade." The information settled into his mind like lead. 15 dead. He should have been 16. Would have been if his chaotic human biology hadn't somehow adapted to an alien venom designed to kill. "What did you do to me?" Devlin asked quietly. Ravenna pulled up a holographic display from her wrist unit showing complex biological data that meant nothing to him. "The bite injects symbiotic nanites into your bloodstream. They're designed to integrate with your biology, enhancing your physical capabilities while creating a dependency bond." Dependency. The nanites require maintenance. Without regular renewal, they fail. And when they fail, your enhanced systems collapse. Organ damage, neural degradation, death within 3 weeks. She said it matter-of-factly, like she was discussing weather. The renewal requires periodic resealing, a smaller bite that introduces fresh nanites. Every 7 days. Devlin stared at her. "You poisoned me. Made me dependent on you to survive. I made you stronger, faster, more resilient. Your broken ribs are already healing at 3 times the normal human rate. Your neurotoxin damage has been completely repaired. Within a week, you'll be physically superior to any unmodified human." She moved to the window, looking out at the cityscape. "The dependency is the price of enhancement. I didn't consent to this. Your survival was consent enough under Kaiar law." Rage surged through him, hot and immediate. Devlin stood moving before conscious thought, closing the distance between them. It was stupid, suicidal. She could break him with one hand. But 6 months of captivity, of fighting, of surviving, only to be claimed like property, it all came crashing together. "That's not how consent works." Ravenna turned to face him, and he saw something shift in her expression. Not anger. Something else. You're right, it's not. But we don't have the luxury of human ethics here. I needed a mate to avoid an arranged marriage that would have destroyed me. You were the only one strong enough to survive my claim. I did what I had to do. By turning me into your slave. By giving you status, protection, a life beyond the arena. Her voice hardened. You are going to die in the dust pits Devlin Cross. Slowly, painfully, for the entertainment of crowds who barely considered you sentient. Now you're a champion's consort, second in rank only to me within House Crimson Helm. Your needs will be met, your safety guaranteed. You'll want for nothing material. Except freedom. Yes, except that. The honesty of it stopped his advance. She wasn't even trying to dress it up to make it sound better than it was. Just stating facts brutal and clear. I hate you, Devlin said quietly. Ravenna nodded. I know. You have every right to. If I could break this bond, I would. I know that too. The door chimed. Ravenna touched her wrist unit, and an elderly Kaiar male entered. He was shorter than Ravenna. His crimson skin faded with age, his movements careful and precise. He wore robes marked with the symbols of the council, and his eyes held the particular kind of weariness that came from witnessing too much history. Champion Ravenna, he said, then turned to Devlin with something that might have been sympathy. Consort Cross, I am Elder Thasian. I've come to provide the cultural translation as is traditional in cross-species claims. How generous, Devlin said flatly. Thasian's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. The human has spirit. Good. You'll need it. He produced a data tablet, holographic displays springing to life around them. Let me explain what has happened and what will happen. Devlin listened as the elder laid it all out in clinical detail. The symbiotic bond, the nanite integration, the dependency cycle, the political implications, the rights and restrictions of a champion's consort. Each word was another bar in the cage he'd been placed in another lock on the door. When Thasian finished, the silence stretched heavy and uncomfortable. So I'm property, Devlin said. You're protected, Thasian corrected gently. The champion's consort holds significant status. You're second only to the champion herself within House Crimson Helm. Your needs will be provided for. Your safety guaranteed. In the hierarchy of Kaiar society, you've been elevated far beyond what any human could normally achieve. And if I refuse, if I try to leave, the bond will kill you within 3 weeks. Painfully. Thasian's voice was kind, but the information was brutal. Withdrawal begins after 7 days without renewal. Organ damage becomes irreversible after 14. Death is certain by 21. So my choices are accept slavery or die. Your choice, Ravenna spoke up, and Devlin heard something in her voice he couldn't quite identify, is to survive or not. I've given you the means to survive. Everything else is negotiable. He turned to look at her. Really look at her, trying to see past the warrior, past the alien physiology, to whatever drove her to do this. Negotiable. You chained me to you with biology, and you call it negotiable. I saved your life. She shot back the first crack in her controlled facade. You were a gladiator, a slave already with a life expectancy measured in weeks. Now you're a consort with status protection and a future beyond dying for entertainment. But I'm still yours. You said it yourself in the arena. Ravenna fell silent. Because he was right. That's exactly what she'd said. What she'd meant. Thasian cleared his throat. I'll leave you both to adjust. Champion the Council expects formal presentation in 48 hours. I suggest you use that time wisely. He moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, Consort Cross, you survived. 15 others did not. That speaks to remarkable constitution, remarkable will. The champion chose well, even if the choosing was forced. The champion, Devlin said, didn't ask. No, Thasian agreed quietly. We rarely do. Then he was gone, and Ravenna was alone with her claimed mate and the weight of what she'd done. The silence stretched between them like a physical barrier. Devlin stood by the window staring out at the alien city, his shoulders rigid with tension. Ravenna remained near the door, giving him space, trying to find words that might bridge the gap between what she'd done and why she'd done it. Finally, Devlin spoke. Why me specifically? Ravenna moved slowly toward the center of the room, maintaining distance. What, out of all the fighters in that arena, why me specifically? She could have given him the tactical answer, the strategic reasoning, could have talked about survival statistics in adaptive capacity, but standing here looking at this human who refused to yield even now, even when defeat was absolute, Ravenna found herself telling the truth. Because you wouldn't quit, she said. I watched your fight footage. 3 rounds that should have killed you. 3 times you adapted, overcame, survived. And when I saw you in that arena, saw the way you looked at me, not with fear or submission, but like I was just another obstacle to overcome, She paused, searching for words. I needed that. Needed someone who couldn't be broken by systems designed to destroy them. So you broke me yourself. The words hit like a physical blow. Ravenna felt them settle in her chest, heavy and sharp. I didn't mean, but the protest died because hadn't she taken his autonomy, his freedom, his very biology, and bent it all to her will? The fact that it was legal, traditional, necessary for her own survival, none of that mattered. Not to him. I'm sorry, Ravenna said quietly. The words felt strange on her tongue. Kiara didn't apologize. Apology implied wrongdoing, and she had acted within her rights. But looking at Devlin, at the carefully controlled devastation on his face, rights seemed like a poor justification. I'm sorry for what I did to you. For the bite, the being the choice you never had. You deserved better. Sorry, he repeated, his voice hollow. You're sorry. He finally turned from the window to look at her directly. Does that undo it? Does sorry make me not dependent on you to survive? No. Then keep it. He moved toward the door, testing. Ravenna didn't stop him. You said everything else is negotiable. Did you mean that? Yes. Then I have terms. This was unexpected. Ravenna moved closer, intrigued despite everything. Terms? I'll accept the bond. I'll play the role of consort for your counsel. I'll stand beside you and smile and do whatever political theater you need. His voice was steady, controlled, but she could see the effort it took. But I won't share your bed. I won't pretend affection I don't feel. And I won't stop looking for a way to break this. Fair. More than fair, considering she'd given him no choice in any of this. Agreed, Ravenna said. To all of it. Surprise flickered across his face. Just like that. Just like that. I'm many things, Devlin Cross, but I'm not cruel. You'll have your own quarters, your privacy, your dignity. She paused. But the resealing is non-negotiable. Every 7 days I'll need to renew the nanites. It's a minor bite. 5 minutes, no more. Without it, you'll die. He flinched but nodded. How long until the first one? 6 days from now. Then we have 6 days before I have to let you touch me again. The words were meant to hurt, and they succeeded. But Ravenna kept her expression neutral. Yes, 6 days. I'll have quarters prepared for you tomorrow. For tonight, you should rest. The nanites are still integrating. You'll be weak for a few more hours. Weak for who? Weak for what purpose? But there was exhaustion beneath the anger now. The adrenaline that had carried him through this conversation was fading. For yourself, rest, Devlin. We have a long road ahead. She left him, then retreating to her private bathing chamber to give him space. Let the hot water wash away the arena dust and the blood, his and others, and tried not to think about the look in his eyes when he'd understood what she'd done. When she emerged, he was where she'd left him, standing by the window. But his shoulders had dropped slightly, exhaustion finally winning over rage. There's food if you're hungry, Ravenna said quietly, and the medical kit if you need anything for pain. He didn't respond, just continued staring out at the alien stars. Ravenna climbed into her bed and lay there in the darkness, listening to his quiet breathing. The bond hummed between them, a living thing she could feel in her blood. It would grow stronger over time, the connection deepening as the nanites integrated fully. She wondered if he could feel it too, if the awareness went both ways. Probably not yet, but soon. And then what? Then she'd have a mate who hated her, bound to her by biology, but separated by every other measure that mattered. It was, she realized with grim irony, exactly what her mother had had, just with the genders reversed. Ravenna closed her eyes and tried to sleep. Tried not to think about the fact that in saving herself from one cage, she might have built another. One that trapped them both. Outside, Zarath Prime turned through its long night, and somewhere in the city, Zarek Coldsteel was planning his response to this public humiliation. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, Ravenna had her mate. She had her freedom. She had everything she wanted. So why did it feel like she'd lost something irreplaceable? The first week passed in cold silence and in careful distance. Ravenna had kept her word. By the second night, Devlin had been moved to his own quarters, a suite 3 doors down from hers, spacious and well-appointed in a way that would have seemed luxurious to anyone who hadn't just been informed they were a biological prisoner. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the sprawling capital of Zarath Prime below. A private bathing chamber with water recycling systems that actually produced hot water. A bed larger than his entire holding cell had been. Everything a consort could want except the one thing that actually mattered, the freedom to leave. Devlin accepted the luxury with the same expressionless mask he wore whenever Ravenna was near. Polite, distant, utterly closed off. He ate the food provided, used the facilities, avoided her completely except when protocols demanded otherwise. It was driving Ravenna to distraction. She stood now in her strategy room, a circular chamber lined with tactical displays showing real-time data from across 3 sectors. Trade route analyses, military deployments, political maneuvering from rival houses. All of it requiring her attention, her decisions, her strategic mind. But her focus kept drifting to the small biomonitor on her wrist, the one that tracked Devlin's vitals through the bond. Heart rate steady at 62 beats per minute. Respiration normal. Body temperature slightly elevated at 37.4 degrees Celsius. The nanites were still integrating, still rebuilding his cellular structure from the ground up. Core hormone levels showed elevated cortisol and adrenaline. Stress markers. He was anxious, angry, fighting a biological reality he couldn't escape. In 5 days, she would need to perform the first resealing. The thought made tension coil in her shoulders. She could still see the look on his face when she'd bitten him in the arena. The betrayal, the rage, the way he'd looked at her afterward like she was something monstrous wearing the skin of civilization. Maybe she was. You're distracted. Ravenna turned sharply. Lyra stood in the doorway, the older Kaiar female's scarred face set in an expression Ravenna had learned to read over decades of training together. Concern mixed with impatience. Lyris had served House Crimson Helm for 40 years, had trained Ravenna herself in combat doctrine and tactical theory. If anyone could read her, it was Lyris. I'm fine, Ravenna said, turning back to the displays. You're staring at biological monitors instead of the tactical reports that actually require your attention. That's not fine. That's troubled. Lyris moved into the room, her movement still graceful despite age and accumulated battle damage. Is it the human? It's everything. Ravenna pulled up a holo display showing troop movements along the northern border. Zarek hasn't made a move yet. That worries me more than if he'd already struck. Zarek is a strategist. He'll wait for the perfect moment to exploit your perceived weakness. Lyris studied the display with a tactician's eye. But you're right to be concerned. You humiliated him publicly, chose a human gladiator over him. Men like that don't forgive such insults. I didn't have a choice. I know. Your mother, don't. Ravenna's voice cut like a blade. Don't compare me to her situation. Lyris was quiet for a long moment, her weathered hands clasped behind her back. I wasn't going to compare. I was going to say your mother would be proud. You chose your own path instead of letting tradition choose for you. That takes courage few possess. The words settled heavily in Ravenna's chest. She wanted to believe them, wanted to think she'd made the right choice. But every time she saw Devlin's carefully blank expression, doubt crept in like poison. He hates me, she said quietly. Yes, Lyris agreed without hesitation. But hate is better than indifference. Hate means he feels something. That's a foundation you can build on. Before Ravenna could respond, an alert chimed across every display in the room. Priority message. Council override. The holographic interface flickered, then resolved into Elder Thasian's aged face, his expression grave. Champion Ravenna. Strategist Zarek Coldsteel has invoked the right of challenge. He demands tactical simulation before the Council to verify your consort's suitability for House Crimson Helm. You have 48 hours to prepare. The session is mandatory. Failure to attend will result in automatic invalidation of the claim. The connection cut. Ravenna stared at the empty space where the hologram had been her tactical mind, already racing through implications. The right of challenge was ancient, rarely used, but legally binding. Zarek was forcing her to prove Devlin's worth in front of the entire council. If Devlin failed, the claim could be invalidated on grounds of unsuitability. If the claim was invalidated, the arranged marriage would be reinstated. If the marriage was reinstated, she'd be right back where she started. Except now she'd also be responsible for Devlin's death. Because without the claim, without the bond, the nanites would fail. And Devlin would die screaming as his enhanced systems collapsed. Clever Lyris said, her tone almost admiring despite the threat. He's not attacking you directly. He's attacking your choice, your judgment. And if the human performs poorly, you look impulsive, desperate, unstable. Exactly the narrative Zarek needs to convince the council I'm unfit for leadership. Ravenna's hands curled into fists. And he's betting that Devlin will fail, that a human can't possibly measure up to Kaiar tactical standards. Can he? I don't know. Ravenna pulled up Devlin's arena footage again, watching him move through opponents with unconventional tactics. He's been here a week. He's still adapting to the nanite integration. He doesn't know our systems, our technology, our tactical doctrine. Then you have 48 hours to teach him. He can barely stand to be in the same room as me. How am I supposed to? You make him understand what's at stake, Lyris interrupted, her voice hard. Not just for you, for him. If Zarek wins this challenge, the claim is void. An avoided claim means the human goes back to the arena, or worse. The thought sent a cold spike of something through Ravenna's chest. Fear, protectiveness. She'd claimed Devlin, bound him to her, made him dependent on her biology for survival. The idea of him being thrown back into the dust pits, or executed as a failed experiment, or handed over to Zarek for disposal numb. That couldn't happen. She had to fix this. Ravenna found Devlin in the training facility attached to his quarters. The space was smaller than her own combat room, but still well-equipped with holographic projection systems for tactical simulations and physical equipment for conditioning work. He was running combat drills against holographic opponents, his movements sharp and controlled despite the lingering stiffness from his arena injuries. She watched from the doorway as he worked through a series of strikes against a simulated Kjar warrior. His technique was efficient but raw human military doctrine adapted for arena survival. It wouldn't be enough against Kaiar tactical systems designed by centuries of refinement. He sensed her presence and stopped breathing hard. Sweat darkened his hair, plastered the training shirt to his chest. The nanite integration was visible now in the definition of his musculature, the speed of his recovery between exercises. He was already stronger than he'd been a week ago. What do you want? His voice was flat. We have a problem. He grabbed a towel, wiped his face. I wasn't aware we were a we. Ravenna stepped into the room. Zarek has challenged your suitability. The council has mandated a tactical simulation. If you fail, the claim is invalidated. That got his attention. Invalidated, meaning what exactly? Meaning the bond is dissolved, the nanites fail, you die. She watched the information process across his face. Or Zarek finds a more permanent solution to the problem you represent. Either way, you have 48 hours to prove you're not a liability. Devlin was silent for a long moment, his jaw working. And if I refuse to participate, then I lose my autonomy. Zarek wins and you die anyway. Slowly. It's the nanites break down your system. Ravenna moved closer. I know you hate me. You have every right to. But this isn't just about me anymore. It's about both of us surviving what I started. He studied her with those blue eyes that seemed to look through pretense to underlying truth. Calculating. Assessing. Finally, he nodded once. What do I need to do? Relief flooded through her. You need to win a tactical simulation against Kaiar combat doctrine. The parameters will be set by Zarek, designed to expose weaknesses. So it's rigged. Thoroughly. Great. He tossed the towel aside. Then we fight dirty. When's the simulation? 2 days. Show me what I'm up against. They trained through the night. Ravenna quickly discovered that teaching Devlin Kaiar tactical systems was pointless. He absorbed the information, understood the theory, and then deliberately ignored it in favor of human military doctrine that made her want to tear her hair out. Asymmetric warfare, psychological operations, environmental exploitation. concepts the Kaiar had never needed because they had always been the superior force in any engagement. "You're leaving your flank exposed," she said, watching him maneuver through a simulated urban environment. "On purpose. I want them to think that's a weakness." He triggered a controlled demolition that collapsed a holographic building onto pursuing enemies. "While they're committing forces to exploit it, I'm 3 blocks away, achieving the objective." Ravenna stopped herself. "Frustrating, brilliant, both. That's not how we fight." "I know, that's why it'll work." Devlin reset the simulation, his movements fluid, despite hours of continuous training. The nanites were doing their work. His endurance was already surpassing normal human limits. Again. They ran scenarios until Ravenna's displays showed dawn approaching. Devlin's performance was erratic by KR standards, sometimes brilliant, sometimes baffling, but never predictable. She was beginning to realize exactly the point. KR doctrine valued optimization and efficiency. Devlin's approach valued adaptability and surprise. Two completely different philosophies of warfare. During a brief rest, she found him studying tactical maps of the council chamber, where the challenge would take place. "Looking for exits," she asked. "Looking for variables. Things Zarek won't account for because they're beneath notice." He zoomed in on environmental systems, power distribution, networks, structural supports. "Your people don't think about support infrastructure as a tactical asset, do you?" "Why would we? It's just life support, climate control, utilities." "Exactly." His smile was sharp and predatory. "Zarek will program the simulation to counter strength and speed. He won't think about countering creativity." Ravenna sat beside him, studying the maps with new eyes. "You're planning to sabotage the environment. I'm planning to use every advantage available. That's what soldiers do. We don't fight fair. We fight to win." He glanced at her. "That a problem?" "No," Ravenna said, slowly feeling something shift in her chest. "Respect, maybe, or recognition." "No, I think it might be perfect." The silence that followed was different than the cold distance of the past week. Not comfortable exactly, but less hostile. Working side by side toward a common goal had created something, not trust, not yet, but the foundation for it. "Why did you really choose me?" Devlin asked suddenly. Ravenna looked at him, surprised by the question. "I told you, your defiance." "No, I mean, why did you need a mate at all? You're the champion. Can't you just refuse to marry?" She was quiet for a long moment, weighing how much truth to share, then decided he deserved to know. "My mother was forced into a political marriage when she was my age. She was fierce, brilliant, the best warrior of her generation. But they married her to a strategist from House Ironvale to secure a trade alliance." Ravenna's voice went flat, emotionless. "Within 5 years, she was broken. Within 10, she was dead. She killed herself in the garden where I used to play as a child." Devlin's expression shifted, something that might have been understanding. "I'm sorry. I swore I'd never let them do that to me. But Kaiar law is absolute. If I refused Zarek outright, the council could force the marriage anyway. I've seen it happen to other females. Watch them dragged to bonding ceremonies they never chose." She met his eyes. "The only way to legally block it was to claim a mate first, to make the choice himself before they could choose for me." "So you chose me." "So I chose you." Ravenna looked away. "I won't pretend it was fair. It wasn't. I took your freedom to preserve mine. That's the truth, and I won't insult you by dressing it up as anything noble or necessary." He held her gaze for a long moment. "At least you're honest about it. It's all I can offer you. It's more than I expected." He turned back to the tactical displays. "We should keep training. 6 hours until the challenge." They worked through scenarios that grew progressively more complex. Urban warfare, hostage rescue, defense against superior numbers. Each time Ravenna began to anticipate Devlin's unconventional approaches. Devlin started to understand when to step back and let Ravenna's overwhelming force carry through. They were beginning to operate as a unit. It was during a simulation designed to test their response to ambush tactics that everything clicked into place. The scenario was straightforward: by KR standards, escort a high-value target through hostile territory. Standard doctrine called for heavy defensive positioning, overwhelming firepower to discourage attack. Devlin had argued for something different. We make ourselves a harder target by moving fast and unpredictable. He'd insisted during planning. Speed over armor, chaos over control. Ravenna had agreed, trusting his judgment even when it contradicted everything she'd been trained to believe. The simulation began. They moved through a holographic, war-torn cityscape, narrow streets, limited sightlines, plenty of cover for ambushers. Ravenna took forward position, her superior senses scanning for threats. Devlin covered their six, the VIP AI moving between them. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Until it wasn't. The ambush came from above. Three hostiles dropped from a building Devlin's tactical sweep had cleared minutes before. Advanced AI adaptive enough to wait for the perfect moment. They had Ravenna in a crossfire, energy weapons charging for lethal strikes aimed at her unarmored side where ceremonial armor left gaps for mobility. She saw it happening, saw the tactical display light up with threat warnings. But she was committed to her current position, her momentum carrying her forward. No time to dodge, no angle for her shield to deflect. The shots would hit, and even in simulation, they would count as a kill. Then Devlin was there. She didn't see him move, just registered the impact as he slammed into her, his shoulder driving into her midsection with enough force to knock her clear. The energy bolts passed through the space where she'd been standing, missing by centimeters. They hit the ground hard, Ravenna's significantly greater weight crushing Devlin beneath her. She heard the air punch out of his lungs, felt him take the full impact of their combined mass against the simulated concrete. Above them, the hostiles were repositioning for another shot. Ravenna moved on pure instinct. She came up firing her heavy plasma rifle, tracking all three targets in rapid succession. The simulation's advanced AI tried to scatter, tried to use numerical advantage, but she was already inside their decision loop. 3 shots, 3 hits, 3 down. The simulation ended, victory but barely. Ravenna turned immediately to Devlin, who was still on the ground, one hand pressed against his ribs. His face was pale, jaw clenched against pain that the simulation's haptic feedback made feel real. Medical override, Ravenna commanded, and the holographic environment dissolved around them, leaving them on the plain training room floor. Why did you do that? You were exposed. He let her help him sit up, wincing. I had the angle to intercept. You could have been killed. Even in simulation, the feedback, it's just training. But she could see the tremor in his hands, the lingering effects of simulated trauma. That's not the point. Ravenna realized she was almost shouting and forced herself to lower her voice. You're not expendable, Devlin. You don't throw yourself in front of attacks meant for me. He looked at her with those steady blue eyes, and something in his expression made her breath catch. Yes, I do. That's what partners do. Partners, not consort and champion, not master and bound servant. Partners. The word settled into her chest like a physical weight. That's what mates do, she corrected quietly, helping him to his feet. Through the bond, she could feel the phantom echo of his pain, the bruised ribs from the impact. It was growing stronger, this connection. She could feel his moods now, his physical state, the particular quality of his focus when he was problem-solving. Thank you for saving me. Don't mention it. But his hand lingered in hers for a moment longer than necessary before he pulled away. They didn't talk about it, but something fundamental had shifted between them. A barrier had cracked, and through that crack, understanding was beginning to seep through. The council chamber was packed when they arrived. Every seat filled, every house represented hundreds of eyes tracking Ravenna and Devlin's entrance. The chamber itself was a massive amphitheater carved from black stone with seating for 500 witnesses arranged in steep tiers around a central platform. The platform was a tactical simulation hub, a circular space 50 meters across that could generate fully immersive holographic environments for combat training and strategic assessment. Ravenna stood at the edge of the platform, her ceremonial armor polished to mirror brightness, and watched as council members and high-ranking officials filed in. The crowd was larger than she'd expected. News of the challenge had spread quickly through the political networks. Everyone wanted to see if the champion's controversial choice would prove worthy or fail spectacularly. Beside her, Devlin was silent. He wore light combat armor in house crimson helm, colors crimson and green, the fit adjusted for his human frame. Without the helmet, she could see his face was calm, controlled. But through the binding, she felt the low thrum of adrenaline and controlled fear. Remember, she said quietly enough that only he could hear. Don't try to match KR doctrine. Trust your instincts. Little late for coaching, he replied, but some of the hardness had left his voice over the past 2 days. Movement at the opposite entrance drew every eye. Zarek Coldsteel entered the chamber, and Ravenna felt her entire body tense. He was tall even for a Kaiar male, easily 7 feet, his skin a darker crimson than hers. Silver hair pulled back in a severe style emphasized the sharp angles of his face. He wore the formal robes of First Strategist, black and silver, marked with the insignia of his position, and his amber eyes found hers across the distance. The look he gave her was pure calculation. No anger, no emotion at all, just cold assessment of a problem to be solved, an obstacle to be removed. It was somehow worse than rage. Elder Thashian stepped onto the platform, his ancient voice amplified across the chamber by systems embedded in the stone. We are gathered to witness the challenge of suitability invoked by First Strategist Zarek Coldsteel against Consort Devlin Cross of House Crimson Helm. The parameters are established by ancient law. Consort Cross will complete a tactical simulation designed by the strategist. Success proves his worth and validates the claim. Failure invalidates the bond. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Ravenna could see the calculations happening in 100 minds. Political alliances shifting, bets being placed. This wasn't just about her and Devlin. It was about power tradition, the very structure of Kaiar society. Thashian continued, the scenario parameters have been submitted and approved. Urban breach and seizure. 3 armed hostiles have fortified a position within a multi-level structure. Consort Cross must neutralize all targets and secure the primary objective within 15 minutes. The simulation will employ advanced Kaiar combat AI programmed with adaptive learning protocols. Ravenna's jaw tightened. Advanced AI meant the opponents would adapt in real-time, learn from Devlin's tactics, counter his strategies. It was designed to test not just tactical knowledge, but creative problem-solving under pressure. The kind of test that would expose any weakness in training or doctrine. It was also exactly the kind of rigid, logic-based system that Devlin had spent 2 days learning to exploit. Champion Ravenna. Thashian's gaze turned to her. Do you accept these terms on behalf of your consort? She looked at Devlin. He gave her the smallest nod. We accept. Then let the challenge commence. The platform hummed to life, ancient technology responding to Thashian's command. Holographic walls materialized around Devlin, building a complex 3-story structure with multiple access points, limited sight lines, defensive positions that would give any attacker nightmares. Tactical displays appeared at the chamber's periphery, showing the building's layout in detail. 3 red markers pulsed deep inside the hostile targets. A single blue marker appeared at the building's perimeter edge. Devlin stepped into the simulation, and Ravenna felt the bond pulse with his surge of adrenaline. She watched from the observation area, her hands gripped tight on the railing. Through their connection, she could feel his heartbeat accelerate. His breathing deepened into the controlled pattern of a soldier entering combat. The simulation would be fully immersive to him, every surface tactile, every threat registering as real. The danger would trigger every survival instinct, honed over months in the arena. The countdown began, 15 minutes displayed in holographic numbers above the structure. Devlin moved, but not the way Zarek expected, not the way any Kaiar warrior would have approached the scenario. Instead of the direct assault that doctrine demanded breach, the nearest entrance used superior firepower to overwhelm defenders. Devlin immediately circled the building's perimeter. He was looking for something, assessing, planning. Ravenna realized what he was doing the moment he found it. The environmental control access panel, partially concealed by simulated debris. In the observation area beside her, Zarek leaned forward, frowning. What is the human doing? Ravenna didn't answer. She just watched, pride and anxiety warring in her chest. Devlin dropped to one knee beside the panel. His fingers moved with the speed the nanites had granted him, bypassing security protocols that would have stopped a normal human. The panel opened, revealing the building's utility interface. He was accessing the ventilation system, his enhanced cognitive processing, allowing him to parse Kaiar technical language he'd only learned days ago. He found what he was looking for. Climate control subroutines, air circulation patterns, exhaust management. His smile was sharp enough to cut. Then he reversed the airflow. Inside the building, the 3 hostile AIs programmed with Kaiar tactical doctrine, expecting conventional assault, suddenly found themselves choking on a concentrated cloud of their own exhaust gases. The ventilation system Devlin had hacked pulled the toxic buildup from where it should have been vented and redirected it into the defender's fortified position. The AIs had no protocol for environmental sabotage. They were programmed to respond to tactical threats, incoming fire breach attempts, flanking maneuvers, not to infrastructure manipulation that turned their own life support against them. They broke formations, stumbling toward the nearest exits in search of clean air. Devlin was waiting. He took down the first two targets with precise shots as they emerged disoriented and exposed their defensive positions abandoned. Perfect headshots that would have been impossible against alert opponents. The third AI tried to adapt firing from within the toxic cloud, but Devlin had already moved. He used a secondary entrance the defenders had left unguarded, and their panic came at the remaining hostile from an unexpected angle. The final engagement was over in seconds. Devlin used smoke grenades to further obscure sightlines, then closed to melee range, where his human-style close combat completely overwhelmed the AI's Kayar fighting algorithms. 8 minutes and 37 seconds. He'd completed the objective in barely half the allotted time. The simulation dissolved. Devlin stood in the center of the platform, breathing hard but upright, victorious. The chamber was absolutely silent. Ravenna watched hundreds of Kayar faces process what they just witnessed. Shock, confusion, grudging respect. The human had won, not through superior strength or advanced technology, through creative thinking that had never occurred to the strategist who designed the challenge. Then Elder Thasian spoke, his voice cutting through the silence. Strategist Zarek, your assessment of the consort's performance. Zarek's expression was carefully controlled, but Ravenna could see the fury beneath. His entire strategy had been to expose the human's weakness to prove the claim was impulsive and ill-considered. Instead, Devlin had demonstrated exactly the kind of adaptive thinking that Kayar doctrine systematically failed to cultivate. The consort, Zarek said, each word precise and sharp, violated every principle of tactical engagement. He sabotaged infrastructure. He used deception instead of strength. He abandoned all conventional combat doctrine in favor of chaos. He won, Ravenna interrupted, stepping forward, against opponents specifically designed to counter Kayar methodology using creativity and adaptation. Exactly the traits you claimed he lacked. He used tricks. He used his mind. She looked at the council members, making eye contact with each elder in turn. Isn't that what we need? Warriors who can think beyond doctrine, who can adapt to threats that don't follow our expectations? The galaxy is full of species who don't fight like we do. Having a consort who understands their thinking, who can predict their tactics, that's not weakness. That's strategic advantage. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Not universal support, but enough. Enough to give the elders pause. Elder Thasian raised a hand for silence. His ancient eyes moved from Ravenna to Devlin to Zarek. The council will deliberate on this challenge. Champion Ravenna consort. Cross, you are dismissed while we confer. It wasn't the immediate validation Ravenna had hoped for, but it wasn't outright rejection either. They'd succeeded in creating doubt and making the council question their assumptions. It was a start. As they left the platform, Ravenna caught Devlin's eye. He was still wary, still angry, but something had shifted. They'd worked side by side, succeeded as partners. The foundation was there. Whether they could build on it remained to be seen. The deliberation took 3 days. 3 days of political maneuvering of Zarek's faction, spreading whispers about unstable leadership and dangerous precedent. 3 days of Ravenna building counter-alliances, calling in favors, leveraging her reputation. 3 days of waiting while the council debated not just her choice of mate, but the very question of whether tradition should bow to individual autonomy. Ravenna barely saw Devlin during those days. He kept to his quarters and she gave him space. But the bond hummed between them constantly, now growing stronger as the nanites completed their integration. She could feel his moods, frustration, determination, occasional flashes of something that might have been hope. Could sense when he was training, when he was resting, when sleep eluded him in the quiet hours. On the third day, the summons came. Ravenna dressed in full ceremonial armor, every piece polished until it could serve as a mirror. This was the moment. Victory or cage, freedom or force. She checked her reflection one last time, saw her mother's eyes looking back at her amber and fierce, and walked to Devlin's quarters. He answered immediately, already dressed in formal consort attire. The week of nanite integration had transformed him visibly. He was stronger, the enhanced musculature evident even through the formal robes. Faster, his movements carrying a predatory grace that hadn't been there before. Healthier, the arena injuries and malnutrition erased by accelerated healing. But it was his eyes that held her attention. Clear, focused, ready. "Whatever happens," she started to say, but he cut her off. "Save it. Let's just get through this." His tone wasn't harsh, just practical. Ravenna nodded and they walked to the council chamber side by side, not touching, but unified in purpose. The chamber was packed again. Every seat filled, every house represented. The weight of hundreds of eyes tracked their entrance. Ravenna kept her spine straight, her expression neutral, her hand carefully not reaching for Devlin's, even though part of her wanted that contact, that reassurance. The Council of Elders sat in their semicircle on the raised dais. 12 ancient Kaiar, their faces weathered by centuries of decisions that had shaped their entire civilization. Elder Thasian stood at the center, his expression unreadable. "Champion Ravenna Stormborn, Consort Devlin Cross." Thasian's voice carried across the silent chamber. "The Council has deliberated on the challenge of suitability. We have weighed the strategist's concerns regarding unconventional methodology against the demonstrable results achieved." Ravenna's heart hammered against her ribs. "The strategist's concerns are noted. Unconventional tactics do represent deviation from established doctrine." Thasian paused, his gaze sweeping the chamber. "However," that single word hung in the air like a blade. "The primary function of a champion's consort is to provide strategic advantage to the house, to enhance the champion's capabilities through complementary skills and perspectives. Consort Cross demonstrated superior adaptive thinking, environmental exploitation, and tactical creativity under pressure. These are assets, not liabilities. These are precisely the capabilities that traditional doctrine fails to cultivate." Ravenna felt hope surge in her chest. Therefore, the challenge is satisfied. The claim stands validated. Relief crashed through her so hard she almost staggered. Beside her, Devlin released a breath he had been holding. Through the bond, she felt his own relief sharp and immediate. But Thasian wasn't finished. However, and Ravenna's relief crystallized into ice. Strategist Zarek has raised valid concerns about the champion's judgment and emotional stability in making this claim. The speed of the decision, the choice of a human over more suitable Kaiar candidates, the political ramifications these matters require additional scrutiny. No, this wasn't validation. This was a trap. Therefore, the Council requires additional proof of the bond's strength and the consort's integration into House Crimson Helm. Joint combat trials will be conducted over the next 4 weeks. The champion and her consort will participate as a bonded unit in tactical scenarios of increasing complexity. Performance will be monitored. Success will validate the claim permanently. Failure, Thasian paused, letting the word hang heavy in the air. Failure will result in immediate dissolution of the bond and reinstatement of the arranged contract with first strategist Zarek Coldsteel. Zarek smiled. It was a terrible thing to see. Cold, calculating. The expression of someone who just maneuvered his opponent exactly where he wanted them. Ravenna understood immediately. This wasn't mercy. This was a more sophisticated trap. 4 weeks of constant scrutiny, looking for any crack, any weakness, any excuse to tear them apart. And she and Devlin barely knew each other, barely trusted each other, had spent a week in cold silence before 2 days of desperate training. They were being set up to fail, given enough rope to hang themselves while the council watched and took notes. "We accept," Ravenna said, "because there was no other choice." "Then this session is concluded. The trials will begin in 3 days. You will be notified of the first scenario parameters." Thasian brought his staff down against the stone with a crack that sounded like a death knell. "The council is adjourned." The crowd erupted into conversation, speculation, political maneuvering. But Ravenna heard none of it. She turned to Devlin, saw her own understanding reflected in his eyes. 4 weeks, she said quietly. "To learn to work as a team," he finished. "For real this time." "Yes." He looked at her for a long moment, then slowly, deliberately, he extended his hand. "Then we'd better start now." Ravenna took it. His palm was warm against hers, calloused from combat. The contact sent a pulse through the bond that was stronger than before. Not romantic, not yet, but connection, partnership. The beginning of something that might, if they fought for it, become real. As partners, she said. As partners? He agreed. Awesome. They left the chamber side by side, already planning their next move, while behind them, Zarek Coldsteel watched and calculated and prepared his own strategies for the trials ahead. The real battle had just begun. The training facility beneath House Crimson Helm became their world. In the pre-dawn hours of their second week of preparation, Ravenna stood at the observation deck and watched Devlin move through the obstacle course with fluid grace that still surprised her. The nanites had completed their work. He was operating at peak efficiency now, faster than any baseline human, stronger, his reflexes tuned to a precision that let him navigate the course's lethal challenges with minimal effort. But it wasn't the physical transformation that fascinated her. It was the way he thought. She'd designed the course using standard Kaiar military doctrine, barriers meant to be overcome with superior strength, choke points designed for overwhelming firepower, direct paths that rewarded aggressive forward momentum. Devlin ignored all of it. He found maintenance hatches she hadn't considered, used support structures as improvised weapons, turned her carefully planned obstacles into advantages through sheer creative reinterpretation of their purpose. Again, she called out, resetting the simulation. This time I'll take point. Devlin paused at the course entrance, breathing only slightly elevated, despite having run through twice already. You always take point, because I'm stronger. Stronger isn't always better. He moved to stand beside her, studying the holographic layout. His finger traced a path that completely ignored the main route. What if I draw their attention while you flank, use your strength where it actually matters instead of wasting it battering through the front door? Ravenna's first instinct was immediate refusal. Kiar females led from the front. That was the natural order built into their biology and culture. Males supported, provided backup, maintained defensive positions. Suggesting she take a secondary role felt wrong on a fundamental level. But she'd chosen Devlin precisely because he broke every rule she knew. If this partnership was going to work, she needed to start thinking like he did. Show me, she said. They ran the simulation together. Devlin went in loud and chaotic, exactly as the automated defenses expected, pulling defensive systems toward manufactured weak points. The AI opponents committed resources to stopping what appeared to be the primary threat. While they were focused on containing his unpredictable assault, Ravenna came through a service entrance he'd identified, hitting hard where the defenses were weakest. The enemy AI never adapted in time. By the time they realized the actual threat, Ravenna was already among them, and her overwhelming force ended the engagement in seconds. Completion time, 3 minutes and 47 seconds. Their best performance yet by nearly a full minute. See, Devlin was breathing hard but grinning. It was the first real smile she'd seen from him since the claiming. Partnership. Something warm unfurled in Ravenna's chest. Not the biological pull of the bond, though that was always there. Something else. Something that felt dangerously like affection, like the beginning of genuine respect. She pushed it down. They had less than 2 weeks until the council's first evaluation. No time for emotional complications. But the moment stayed with her as they continued training through scenarios that grew progressively more complex. Urban warfare, hostage rescue, defense against numerically superior forces. Each iteration taught them to read each other better. Ravenna began to anticipate Devlin's unconventional approaches before he executed them. Devlin started to understand when to step back and let Ravenna's overwhelming force carry the engagement. They were becoming a genuine unit. Not just two individuals forced together, but a partnership where each member's strengths amplified the others. The change became undeniable during their third week in a simulation designed to test their response to ambush tactics from multiple vectors. The scenario was straightforward on the surface: escort a high-value target through hostile territory while under constant threat of ambush. Standard Kaiar doctrine called for heavy defensive positioning, maximum firepower to discourage attack, slow, methodical advancement that minimized exposure. Devlin had argued for something completely different. We make ourselves harder to hit by moving fast and unpredictable, he'd insisted during their planning session. Speed over armor, chaos over control, force them to react to us instead of executing their prepared ambush. Ravenna had agreed, trusting his tactical judgment even when it contradicted everything she'd been trained to believe. The simulation began. They moved through a holographic, war-torn cityscape, narrow streets choked with debris, limited sightlines that favored ambushers, plenty of elevated positions perfect for overwatch. Ravenna took the forward scout position, her superior sensory capabilities scanning for threats. Devlin covered their six preventing rear attacks. The VIP AI moved between them vulnerable, but protected by their overlapping fields of fire. Everything proceeded according to their plan for the first 8 minutes. Then the trap sprang, the ambush came from above and behind simultaneously. 6 hostiles, 3 dropping from a building, Devlin's tactical sweep had cleared minutes before, 3 emerging from concealed positions in their rear. Advanced AI adaptive enough to wait for the perfect moment, coordinated enough to attack from multiple vectors simultaneously. Ravenna saw the forward threat first. 3 hostiles with her in a perfect crossfire energy, weapons already charged. She was committed to her forward position momentum carrying her toward the VIP. No time to dodge, no angle for her shield to deflect all 3 simultaneous shots. The impacts would hit her unarmored side, and even in simulation, they would register as lethal strikes. Then Devlin was there. She didn't see him move, didn't have time to register his approach. Just felt the impact as he slammed into her. His shoulder driving into her midsection with enough force to knock her completely off her trajectory. The energy bolts passed through the space where she'd been standing, missing by centimeters. They hit the ground together hard. Ravenna's significantly greater weight and momentum crushed Devlin beneath her. She heard the air punch out of his lungs, felt him take the full impact of their combined mass against the simulated concrete. Above them, the 3 forward hostiles were repositioning for follow-up shots. Ravenna moved on pure combat instinct. She came up firing her heavy plasma rifle, tracking all 3 targets in rapid succession. The simulation's advanced AI tried to scatter, tried to use their numerical advantage and superior positioning. But she was already inside their decision loop, operating on the kind of battle sense that came from 73 undefeated arena matches. 3 shots, 3 hits, 3 down. Behind them, she heard the distinctive crack of Devlin's rifle taking down the rear ambushers. Even hurt, even probably injured from cushioning her impact, he was still in the fight. The simulation ended. Victory, though the margin had been razor thin. Ravenna turned immediately to Devlin, who was still on the ground. One hand pressed against his ribs, his face pale jaw clenched against pain that the simulation's haptic feedback system made feel absolutely real. Medical override, Ravenna commanded, and the holographic environment dissolved around them, leaving them on the training room's plain floor. Are you injured? Just bruised. The feedback system doesn't pull punches. He let her help him sit up, wincing. But nothing's broken. Why did you do that? The question came out sharper than she'd intended. You were exposed to the rear threats. You should have engaged them, not. You were about to take 3 simultaneous hits to vitals. I had the angle to intercept. His blue eyes met hers steadily. Simple math. Better me bruised than you dead even in simulation. That's not, you can't just, Ravenna stopped trying to organize her thoughts. You're not expendable, Devlin. You don't throw yourself in front of attacks meant for me. Yes, I do. He said it simply, like stating an obvious fact. That's what partners do. That's what teammates do. You'd do the same for me. Would she? A week ago, Ravenna wasn't sure. She'd claimed him out of necessity, seen him as a solution to a political problem. But now, looking at him sitting on the training room floor, with phantom pain still evident in the tension around his eyes, she realized the answer was yes. Absolutely yes. She would take a hit for him without hesitation. When had that changed? That's what mates do, she corrected quietly, helping him to his feet. Through the bond, she could feel the echoes of his pain, the bruised ribs that the simulation had inflicted. The connection was strong enough now that they shared physical sensations at a reduced intensity. Thank you for saving me. Don't mention it. But his hand lingered in hers for a moment longer than strictly necessary before he pulled away, and she saw something shift in his expression. Not forgiveness exactly, but maybe the beginning of it. They didn't discuss it further, but something fundamental had changed between them. The barrier of anger and resentment had developed cracks, and through those cracks, genuine partnership was beginning to grow. The 4th week brought political crisis that threatened to derail everything they'd built. Ravenna stood in her strategy room, surrounded by holographic displays showing reports from across the sector, and felt the familiar sensation of walls closing in. Zarek's faction had been working relentlessly. Whispers had become open accusations. Concerns had evolved into formal petitions. A coalition of 5 houses was now openly demanding that the council dissolve her claim on grounds of destabilizing leadership and erosion of traditional values. Translation, they were terrified. Terrified that if Ravenna succeeded in choosing her own mate, other females would demand the same right. That the entire social structure built on arranged marriages and political alliances would begin to crumble. She couldn't let that happen, not just for herself. For every Kayar female who'd been caged by duty and tradition, who'd watched their mothers broken by forced bonds, who dreamed of something different. The door opened without warning. Devlin entered carrying 2 cups of the coffee he'd discovered in the estate's kitchen systems, a human beverage that the Kayar food processors could apparently synthesize. He set one beside her without comment and took up position at the secondary tactical display already scanning the incoming data. When had this become normal? When had his presence in her private spaces stopped feeling like invasion and started feeling like inevitability? Like home. How bad, he asked, his eyes moving across the reports with the tactical assessment skills that had become second nature. Bad. Zarek has convinced 5 houses that our bond represents a threat to social order. They're demanding emergency council intervention. What happens if they vote to intervene? Ravenna pulled up the legal precedents, hating every word. Emergency dissolution, immediate reinstatement of the arranged marriage. You'd be... She couldn't finish the sentence. Back in the arena, Devlin finished calmly, like he was discussing tactical options rather than his own potential execution. Or dead from nanite failure. When's the vote? 3 days? Then we have 3 days to change enough minds to prevent it. He pulled up a tactical map of the political landscape nodes representing houses and alliances connections, showing relationships and dependencies. We've been playing defense this whole time. Time to go on offense. She turned to look at him fully. His jaw was set in that stubborn line she'd learned meant he was formulating a plan that would be either brilliant or reckless. Possibly both. What are you thinking? That Zarek's coalition is built on 5 houses, right? Political alliances held together by perceived mutual benefit. He highlighted House Stormwatch, a minor house known for opportunistic allegiances. What if we crack one of them? Get them to withdraw support, the whole coalition becomes unstable. They're bound by formal alliance. Their word is only as good as their self-interest, Devlin interrupted. Politics is the same everywhere. Find the weak link, apply the right pressure, make staying in the coalition more costly than breaking ranks. It was cynical, manipulative, exactly the kind of ruthless political maneuvering that Kayar excelled at, but viewed through a human lens that saw patterns the Kayar missed. Ravenna found herself smiling despite the dire circumstances. You're starting to think like one of us? God help me. But he was smiling too, that rare, genuine expression that transformed his face. What do we have on House Stormwatch? They worked through the night building leverage, preparing arguments, finding pressure points. It felt like their combat training simulations, Devlin's creativity combining with Ravenna's deep knowledge of Kayar power structures to create something neither could have achieved alone. At some point around midnight, she realized they were working in perfect synchronization, finishing each other's tactical assessments, building on each other's ideas without needing to explain the underlying logic. The bond had grown stronger than she'd realized, deeper than just biological dependency. Around 2 in the morning, Devlin finally pushed back from the displays and rubbed his eyes. We need to sleep, can't think straight anymore, and we need to be sharp for the House Stormwatch meeting tomorrow. You should rest. I'll keep working. Ravenna. He didn't move, just said her name with enough weight that she stopped. When's the last time you actually slept? I'm fine. That's not an answer. She turned to dismiss him, to assert her authority and send him away. But the genuine concern in his eyes stopped her cold. Not pity, not duty, real worry for her well-being. When was the last time anyone had worried about her? Really worried, not as a political asset or military resource, but as a person. 2 days, she admitted quietly. Maybe 3. That's not sustainable. You're running yourself into the ground. I don't have a choice. If we lose this vote, Devlin interrupted, it won't be because you didn't work hard enough. It'll be because the system is fundamentally rigged. He stood moved to stand directly in front of her. You can't fight everything alone anymore. That's the whole point of partnership. You have me now. I have advisors, I have my second in command, I mean me. His hand found hers warm and solid. Your mate, your partner, the one bound to you at a cellular level who can literally feel when you're running yourself into the ground. Let me help, actually help, not just with tactics and strategy, but with this, the crushing weight of leadership. The responsibility for not just her own fate, but for every female who looked to her as an example. The fear that she'd made everything worse, that her attempt to break free had only created a different kind of cage. Something cracked inside Ravenna's chest. Not breaking, opening. All the pressure she'd been holding, all the fear she couldn't show to her house, or her soldiers, or the council, it suddenly had somewhere to go. I'm scared, she whispered. The admission felt like exposing a mortal weakness. I'm terrified that I've made everything worse, that in trying to save myself I've destroyed any chance for change, that I've trapped you in my failure. Devlin didn't offer empty platitudes, didn't tell her it would all be fine. Instead, he pulled her into an embrace that was unpracticed but genuine. His arms around her shoulders, her face pressed against his chest, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. It was the first time since her mother's death that Ravenna had let another being offer her comfort. You're not failing, he said quietly. You're fighting. There's a difference. Fighting means you're still in it, still pushing back, still refusing to surrender. His hand moved to her hair, fingers threading through the elaborate braids. And you're not fighting alone anymore. That's what you need to remember. Whatever happens, we face it as partners. Ravenna pulled back enough to look at his face. I'm sorry for what I did to you, for the bite, the bond, taking your choice away. You deserve better than being claimed like property. Yeah, I did, he agreed, not softening it. But I'm making a choice now. Right now, I choose to stand with you. Not because the nanites make me need you to survive, because you're worth standing with. Even after everything, even after. His smile was tired but genuine. You bit me in an arena and bound me with alien technology. Pretty hard to top that for a bad first impression, but you also kept your word about everything else. Gave me space when I needed it, respected my boundaries, trusted me in combat. You're fierce and terrifying and sometimes infuriating. His thumb brushed across her cheek. But you're also honest, and that matters more than you know. Ravenna felt tears burning behind her eyes. Kayar didn't cry. Tears were weakness, emotional overflow, loss of control. But standing here in the quiet darkness with this human who'd seen her at her absolute worst and chosen to stay anyway, she couldn't stop them. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. Partnership, trust, collaboration. I was raised to command, not to share power. Then we learned side by side. Devlin's hand cupped her face, his touch gentle despite the calluses. I've never been consort to an alien warrior woman. You've never had a partner who questions every assumption you make. We're both making this up as we go. That's terrifying. Yeah, but also kind of exciting if you think about it. His expression shifted, became more serious. Ravenna, what you said that first night in the arena about needing my defiance. Did you mean it? Yes, every word. Then let me defy this with you. Not as your claimed mate following orders, as your partner making a conscious choice. He took both her hands, held them between his. I choose you, not the bond, not the nanites. You, the woman who'd rather fight impossible odds than surrender to tradition, who chose freedom even when it cost everything. That's who I'm standing with. The words hit harder than any physical blow could have. Ravenna had claimed him, bound him, made him biologically dependent on her for survival. But he was claiming her back with words and will, and the particular kind of courage it took to forgive someone who'd hurt you. I choose you too, she said, her voice rough with emotion. I claimed you out of desperation and necessity, but I choose you now out of respect, out of partnership, out of love. He said it like a question, testing the word in this context. Ravenna tested it too, let it rest on her tongue. Love. The emotion her people dismissed as weakness, as distraction, as something that got in the way of duty and optimal decision-making. The thing her mother had died for lack of. But standing here feeling the warmth of connection that went deeper than biology and programming, she recognized it for exactly what it was. Yes, she said, out of love. Devlin kissed her. It wasn't the aggressive claiming she might have expected from her own culture. Wasn't the dominance display that Kaiar courtship demanded. It was gentle, questioning, an invitation rather than a conquest asking permission even as it offered connection. Ravenna responded with the same careful tenderness, pouring everything she couldn't articulate into the contact. This was consent, mutual, chosen, sacred in a way the forced claiming could never have been. When they finally separated, both breathing hard, Ravenna felt fundamentally changed. The bond was still there, humming in her blood, tethering them together at a cellular level. But layered over it now was something infinitely stronger, something that no council vote could dissolve, no political maneuvering could erase. Whatever happens with that vote, Devlin said, his forehead resting against hers, we face it as partners, as equals. As partners, she agreed, as equals. They didn't return to separate quarters that night. For the first time since the claiming, they slept in the same space, choosing proximity out of want rather than necessity. Ravenna lay beside Devlin in the darkness, listening to his breathing, even out into sleep, feeling the steady pulse of the bond between them. For the first time in weeks, she slept without nightmares. The political maneuvering over the next 2 days was intense and exhausting. Ravenna and Devlin worked as a unified team, leveraging every advantage they could find. They met with House Stormwatch's matriarch, presenting evidence that Zarek's coalition would ultimately serve his interests at the expense of smaller houses. They built alternative alliances, offering trade concessions and military support to houses that had remained neutral. Most critically, they went public. Ravenna gave an interview to the planetary news networks, speaking openly about her mother's death, about the cage of arranged marriages, about why she'd invoked the gauntlet. Devlin stood beside her, a living example of partnership chosen rather than forced. The response was immediate and divided. Traditional houses condemned her for undermining social stability. But younger Kaiar, especially females of the warrior caste, began speaking up in support. The conversation shifted from, is the claim legitimate, to should females have the right to choose their mates? It was exactly the disruption the Zarek had feared. The vote came on the third day, held in closed council session. Ravenna and Devlin waited in an antechamber, the tension almost unbearable. Through the bond, they drew strength from each other, Ravenna's fierce determination mixing with Devlin's calm, tactical assessment. When Elder Thasian finally emerged, his expression was carefully neutral. The vote was close, he said without preamble. House Stormwatch withdrew from the coalition last night. Without their support, 3 other houses also withdrew. The remaining houses lacked the majority needed to force intervention. Ravenna felt her knees go weak with relief. The claim stands. The claim stands. The council has voted to allow the joint trials to proceed as originally planned. If you succeed in the trials, the claim will be validated permanently. Zarek's arranged marriage contract is formally dissolved. Thank you, Elder. Thasian's expression shifted slightly. Don't thank me yet. Zarek didn't accept this quietly. He's invoked the right of final challenge. If you complete the trials successfully, he has one last opportunity to contest the claim through single combat. Cold dread washed through Ravenna. Single combat against whom? Against you, champion, for the right to claim you himself as is his ancient prerogative as the rejected arranged partner. Thasian's old eyes held sympathy. He's betting that even if the human proves his worth, you won't be able to defeat Zarek in direct combat. And if you fall, the arranged marriage automatically reinstates. Ravenna's mind raced through implications. Zarek was a strategist, not a frontline warrior, but he was still Kaiar male, still trained in combat, still physically formidable, and he'd have time to prepare specifically to counter her fighting style. When, she asked? After the final trial, 3 weeks from now. 3 weeks to prepare for a fight that would determine everything. We accept, Ravenna said, because there was no other choice. Thasian nodded. Then I suggest you use the time wisely. Zarek is already preparing. He won't make this easy. As the elder left, Devlin turned to her. So after we prove ourselves as partners, you have to fight him solo. Yes. That's not exactly fair. No, but it's the law. Ravenna took his hand. We'll face it when it comes. Right now, we focus on the trials. They completed the joint trials over the next 3 weeks with performances that exceeded every expectation. Each scenario tested a different aspect of their partnership: communication under pressure, tactical adaptation, mutual support in crisis situations. Every time they exceeded the council's benchmarks. Not through individual excellence, but through genuine teamwork that leveraged both their strengths. By the final trial, even the most skeptical council members had to admit they worked together better than most bonded pairs who'd been together for decades. Which meant Zarek's final challenge was the last barrier between Ravenna and permanent freedom. The challenge was scheduled for 3 days after the trial completion. Ravenna spent those days training, preparing, strategizing. Devlin helped where he could, analyzing Zarek's known fighting style, suggesting unconventional counters. On the morning of the challenge, Ravenna woke to find Devlin already up, standing at the window watching the sunrise. "Nervous?" she asked. "Terrified," he admitted. "If something happens to you, nothing will happen." She moved to stand beside him. "I'm the champion for a reason. He's had 3 weeks to prepare specifically to fight you, to study your style, find your weaknesses." "True, but I have something he doesn't." "What's that?" "Someone worth fighting for." She turned to face him fully. "I'm not fighting for political position anymore. I'm fighting for us, for this partnership, for the future we're building. That makes me more dangerous than Zarek could possibly prepare for." Devlin pulled her into an embrace. "Win," he said simply. "Come back to me. Always." The combat took place in the grand arena, the same space where she'd claimed him weeks ago. Full circle. Zarek entered from the opposite gate, and Ravenna assessed him with a warrior's eye. He'd trained hard, that was evident. Bulked up, added muscle to his strategist's frame. He wore combat armor she didn't recognize, probably custom designed to counter her known techniques. The fight was brutal. Zarek had indeed prepared specifically for her. He knew her preferred strikes, her typical combinations, her go-to counters. For the first 5 minutes, they were evenly matched, her superior combat experience balanced against his specifically tailored preparation. Then Ravenna did something Zarek couldn't have anticipated. She started fighting like Devlin. Instead of the direct, powerful strikes Kaiar combat doctrine demanded, she began using environmental elements. Feints and deceptions, unpredictable angles. All the unconventional tactics she'd learned watching Devlin work. Zarek's preparation became a liability. He'd studied the champion. He wasn't prepared for the partner she'd become. The fight ended with Ravenna holding Zarek in a submission hold. He had no counter for one Devlin had shown her from human martial arts traditions. "Yield," she said quietly. Zarek's eyes burned with fury, but he spoke the words. "I yield." Victory, complete, final. The crowd's roar was deafening, but Ravenna only had eyes for Devlin, standing in the champion's box, smiling at her with pride and love and relief. They'd won. They were free. The celebration was brief. Ravenna had no interest in political theater anymore. She and Devlin retreated to her chambers, their chambers now, and made a decision that had been building for weeks. "We're leaving," Ravenna said that night. Devlin looked up from the tactical display he'd been reviewing, surprise clear on his face. "Leaving what?" "All of it. The house, the council, Zerath Prime." She pulled up star charts highlighting the non-aligned sectors beyond Kaiar territorial control. "We take my personal wealth, buy a ship, and start over. Independent security consulting, using everything we've learned, everything we are as partners. But on our own terms. No council, no politics. Just us. You'd abandon your house. I'd abandon a cage." She moved to stand beside him. "My mother died in hers. I won't. We proved we can work as partners. Now I want to prove we can build something new, something better." Devlin studied the star charts, his tactical mind already assessing routes and opportunities. "It's risky. No backup, no support structure, no safety net. We'd have each other." "Yeah." His smile grew. "We would." He pulled up additional navigation data. "If we're doing this, we do it smart. We'll need a ship with good range, defensive capabilities, quarters for eventual crew expansion." "Devlin." She stopped him with a hand on his arm. "Are you sure I'm asking you to give up any chance of ever finding a way to break the bond? Once we leave Kaiar space, we're committed to this. To us. To a future where the bond is permanent." He turned to face her fully, those blue eyes serious and clear. "I stopped looking for ways to break the bond 2 weeks ago. Around the time I realized I didn't want to. You're giving me a choice right now. Stay here and constantly fight the system, or leave and be actually free. I choose freedom. With you. Always with you." Ravenna kissed him deep and thorough, letting the action speak what words couldn't fully express. When they broke apart, both were smiling. "Then we leave at first light," she said, "before Zarek can regroup and find some new way to trap us here." The preparations took 36 hours of careful, quiet work. Ravenna liquidated her personal assets, converting wealth into portable credits. Devlin identified a suitable ship, a sleek courier vessel, built for long-range operations, small enough for two to crew but with potential for expansion. They filed the departure paperwork as a diplomatic mission to non-aligned space, vague enough to avoid immediate questions. But before they could leave, they had one final obstacle. The sabotage came 15 minutes before their scheduled departure. Ravenna was in the ship's cargo hold securing the last of their equipment when the explosion rocked the docking bay. Not large enough to destroy anything, but precisely calculated to cripple the ship's faster-than-light drive. The damage would take hours to repair, hours they didn't have, if they wanted to leave before Zarek realized what they were doing. She knew immediately who was responsible. Through the bond, she felt Devlin's spike of adrenaline from the bridge. "Ravenna, we've got a company. 8 armed hostiles, Zarek's personal guard." So this was it, Zarek's final move. If he couldn't have her through marriage or combat, he'd ensure she couldn't leave with Devlin. Better to destroy what he couldn't possess. "I'm coming to you," she said, already moving toward the bridge. "Negative. They're between you and the bridge. I'm coming to you." "Devlin, don't." But he was already moving. She could feel him through the bond, feel his tactical mind spinning through the scenario at impossible speed. The hostiles expected her to fight her way to him. Expected Kaiar doctrine, power meeting, power strength, overwhelming resistance. They got human ingenuity instead. Devlin triggered the ship's fire suppression system, flooding the corridor between the bridge and cargo hold with sound-dampening foam. The hostiles' communication system sputtered. Their coordination failed. Then he came through the ventilation shaft, a space too small for Kaiar males, but perfect for his human frame. He dropped into the cargo hold beside her plasma rifle, ready, that fierce grin on his face that meant he was in his element. 8 hostiles, heavy armor, expecting conventional assault," he reported in a rush. "I say we give them one." Ravenna smiled, fierce and proud. Her partner, her mate, her equal. Side by side, always. They moved as one perfect unit, their training and bond creating seamless coordination. Ravenna was the overwhelming force, drawing fire and attention, her combat armor shrugging off hits that would have killed lesser warriors. Devlin was the chaos element, striking from unexpected angles, using environmental elements to create confusion. The hostiles never had a chance. They were programmed for Kaiar tactics, prepared for power and honor duels. They got partnership instead. They got innovation. They got something Zarek's rigid thinking could never have anticipated. When the last hostile fell, Ravenna and Devlin stood back to back in the smoke-filled docking bay, breathing hard, covered in scoring marks from near misses, but alive and victorious. "The FTL drive?" she asked. "I can patch it. 2 hours, maybe 3. He looked at her, grinning despite the danger they'd just faced. Worth it. Every second. They departed Zarath Prime 4 hours later, leaving Zarek's unconscious guards for station security and a formal message for the Council. "The claim is valid. The bond is permanent. We choose freedom. Any attempt to interfere will be met with appropriate force." As they broke orbit, watching the capital city shrink behind them, Ravenna felt a weight she'd carried for 31 years finally lift. No council oversight, no arranged marriages, no expectations except the ones they set for themselves. "Any regrets?" Devlin asked from the pilot's seat. Ravenna moved to stand behind him, her hands on his shoulders. Through the bond, she felt his contentment, his excitement for the unknown future, his love. Yes, love, steady and sure and absolutely real. "None," she said. "You, just one." He looked up at her with those blue eyes that had refused to submit even in the darkest moments. "I regret that it took getting bitten in an arena to find you. Could have saved us both a lot of trauma if we'd met some other way." She laughed, the sound free and genuine and unburdened. "Where to first?" "Non-aligned space. Word is there's a mining dispute in the Tharsis sector that both sides are too proud to resolve. Sounds like it could use some creative problem solving. And after we solve it, we build a reputation, show the galaxy that there's a better way than rigid doctrine or pure chaos. Show them what real partnership looks like." He engaged the faster-than-light drive and the stars stretched into lines. We changed the game. Ravenna leaned down and kissed the top of his head. In unity. As one, he agreed, and they jumped to hyperspace, leaving their old lives behind and jumping toward a future they'd build on their own terms. 5 years later, the unconquered legacy had become a legend. Ravenna stood on the bridge of their vessel, significantly upgraded from the original courier ship, now a sleek frigate with quarters for a crew of 12 specialists, recruited from a dozen different species, and reviewed the latest contract proposal. The tactical display showed a complex situation. The Xanti Confederation wanted them to mediate a border dispute that had been escalating toward full warfare for months. Standard rate plus hazard pay, enough to fund operations for 6 months. They're desperate, Devlin said, appearing beside her with 2 cups of coffee. After 5 years, he still couldn't function without the stuff. Offering double the usual fee if we can resolve it within a month. Can we? Probably. Their negotiating positions are based on outdated tactical assumptions and wounded pride. Standard territorial nonsense. He pulled up the relevant intelligence reports. I'd say 2 weeks if we play it right. The hard part isn't solving the problem, it's getting both sides to admit they want it solved. Ravenna watched him work, fingers moving across holographic interfaces with practiced ease, and felt the familiar surge of affection and partnership that had only deepened over half a decade. The bond was still there, still requiring periodic renewal through the resealing bite, but it had long since become more than biological necessity. It was a foundation they'd chosen to build on, a connection they actively strengthened rather than simply endured. Their success over the past 5 years had been built mission by mission, each job adding to their growing legend. The Tharsis mining dispute, their first job, had been resolved in 11 days when they proved both sides were being manipulated by a third party profiting from their conflict. The revelation had shocked everyone except Devlin, who tracked the financial flows with methodical precision. The Viridian hostage crisis had made their reputation. What appeared to be a terrorist attack turned out to be an elaborate insurance fraud scheme. Devlin had identified the inconsistencies in the hostages' behavior. Ravenna had convinced them that surrender was preferable to facing her in combat when their deception was exposed. The Omega Station defense had cemented their legendary status. They'd held off a raider fleet 3 times their size using Devlin's guerrilla tactics and Ravenna's strategic positioning, buying time for reinforcements that saved 15,000 civilian lives. The station commander had tried to offer them permanent positions. They'd politely declined. Each mission proved the same fundamental point: partnership was stronger than dominance. Adaptation was superior to rigid doctrine, and love, freely chosen and actively maintained, created bonds no force could break. The Kaiar Council had noticed. So had dozens of other species and governments. Requests flooded in. Some wanted tactical consultation. Others wanted to learn their methods. A few brave Kaiar females had quietly contacted Ravenna, asking how they might choose their own mates. Ravenna answered everyone personally. The revolution she'd started by claiming Devlin in that arena was spreading. Slowly, quietly, but inevitably. Change was coming to Kaiar society, whether the traditionalists liked it or not. Elder Thasian sent another message, Ravenna mentioned casually. That got Devlin's attention. And the council wants to hire us for a consultation on adaptive tactical doctrine. Seems our success has made them reconsider some of their more rigid traditions. She smiled at his expression. They're offering significant compensation. The irony is almost physically painful. Almost. Ravenna set down her cup and moved into his arms, a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. They want us to come back and teach them everything they tried to prevent us from proving. Are we taking the bow? Only if you want to. I have no interest in going back to Zarath unless it's on our terms, showing them exactly what they lost when they tried to cage me. Devlin was quiet for a moment, considering. Might be interesting. Prove the point decisively. Show them what happens when you let people choose their own paths instead of forcing them into predetermined roles. Then we'll consider it after the Xanti contract. She kissed him slow and deep, feeling the bond pulse with shared contentment and love. 5 years, and this never got old. Never became routine. The resealing is coming up. 3 days. I know. His voice dropped lower, intimate. Looking forward to it. As am I, beloved. The term of endearment, once foreign to her KR sensibilities, now came as naturally as his name, because that's what Devlin was. Not her claimed mate through biological coercion, not her dependent consort, her beloved partner, her equal in every way that mattered. The communication system chimed. Kess, their Vex navigator, appeared on the screen, a graceful being with crystalline skin that refracted light into rainbow patterns. Captain Stormborn, we're approaching the Xanti border. Ready for your orders. Ravenna straightened, sliding seamlessly into command mode. Drop to sublight. Passive scans only. I want full tactical analysis before we announce our presence. Standard first contact protocols. Understood, Captain. Executing now. The screen went dark. Devlin was already pulling up preliminary intelligence on the Xanti situation, his tactical mind processing threat assessments and opportunity analyses. They worked in perfect synchronization, building on each other's insights, challenging assumptions, creating solutions that neither could have developed alone. This was what they'd built over 5 years of partnership. Not just a successful business, not just a legendary reputation, but a genuine union that made them both stronger, smarter, more capable than they'd ever been separately. Ravenna had claimed Devlin in blood, and desperation bound him with biology and necessity. He'd claimed her back in choice and forgiveness, in trust and love freely given. As partners, they'd created something the galaxy had never seen before. A bond that was chosen, a partnership that was earned, a love that was free. Ready, Devlin asked, hand extended. Ravenna took it, feeling the warmth of his skin, the steady pulse of the bond between them, the electric certainty of their shared purpose. Always, she said. They walked toward the bridge as one, toward their crew, toward the next challenge, toward the future they'd built with their own hands. And tonight, in 3 days, when the resealing was due, they would renew their bond once again. Not from necessity, though that remained true. From choice. That night, in the quiet of their shared quarters, the resealing ceremony took on deeper meaning than usual. Ravenna stood before Devlin, her hands framing his face. 5 years of this ritual, every 7 days without fail, and it never became merely routine. Every renewal was a conscious choice, a deliberate recommitment to their partnership. Ready, beloved? She asked, her thumbs stroking his cheekbones gently. Always. His hands settled on her waist, steadying himself. Though after 5 years, you'd think I'd stop being nervous. You're nervous, surprise colored her voice. Even now, every time? His blue eyes met hers with complete honesty. What if one day you decide you're tired of renewing it? Tired of me, tired of this life we've built. Ravenna's breath caught. She'd never considered that he might doubt. After everything they'd built, all they'd proven, he still feared she might choose to let him go. Devlin, look at me. He met her eyes and she let him see everything. The love, the certainty, the absolute commitment that had only grown stronger over time. 5 years ago, I claimed you because I was desperate, she said, her voice steady and sure. I bit your neck and bound you to me without consent, without asking, without giving you any choice in the matter. It was wrong. It was necessary. It was the worst thing I've ever done, and simultaneously the best decision I ever made. She leaned closer, her lips hovering over the faint scar on his neck, barely visible now after so many renewals, but always present, always a reminder of where they'd started. But every 7 days since we left Zerath, I've had a choice. I could let the bond fade, let the nanites fail, free you from the biological dependency that ties you to me. Her voice dropped to a whisper, intimate and fierce. I choose to renew it. Not because you need me to survive, though that's still true. I renew it because I need you to live, because you make me better, because together we're stronger than either of us could ever be alone. Ravenna, she bit. The sensation was familiar after 5 years, but no less intense. Her venom flowed into his bloodstream, carrying fresh nanites to reinforce the bond's biological foundation. But more than that, it carried her emotions through their connection, her commitment, her love, her absolute certainty that this was exactly where she belonged. Through the mind, she felt his response, trust deeper than words, devotion that transcended biology, the sense of home that came from being with the one person who truly understood you. When she released him, he was breathing hard, pupils dilated, The bond pulsed between them, renewed and strengthened physical proof of their choice to stay together. "I love you," she said clearly. "Not because biology demands it, not because the bond compels it, because you saw me at my worst and chose to stay, because you make me better, because you're mine and I'm yours, and that's a choice we make together every single day." Devlin pulled her into a kiss that was equal parts tender and fierce. 5 years of partnership and love distilled into a single moment of connection. 5 years down, he murmured against her lips. Forever to go. Forever, she agreed. In that moment, Ravenna understood what her mother had died lacking. Not just freedom from political marriage, but partnership, equality. Love that was chosen daily, renewed constantly, and cherished absolutely. They'd built something the Kayar had never conceived possible. A bond that was both biological and emotional, necessary and chosen. Unbreakable not because they couldn't break it, but because they chose every single day not to. The unconquered legacy wasn't just their reputation across a dozen star systems. It was this, them, united by choice. The unconquered legacy, Devlin said later, as they lay together, watching the stars streak past through the viewport. Written in choice and blood and love. Ravenna finished her hand finding his in the darkness. They'd started with a bite in an arena, a violation wrapped in desperation, necessity masquerading as choice. From that violent beginning, they'd built something neither could have imagined. A partnership that challenged empires. A love that redefined what bonds could be. A legacy that proved freedom and commitment weren't opposites, but partners themselves. Somewhere on Zerath Prime, young Kiar females were whispering about the champion who chose her own mate and built a legend from that choice. Somewhere in the council chambers, elders debated whether to embrace the change she represented or fight to maintain traditions that were already crumbling. Somewhere across a dozen systems, beings of every species watched the unconquered legacy's continued success and wondered if they too could choose their own paths rather than accepting the ones chosen for them. The revolution Ravenna had started with a single desperate bite was spreading like fire through dry grass. And she and Devlin stood at its heart, proving with every mission, every choice, every renewal of their bond, that the greatest strength came not from dominance or submission, but from two souls choosing again and again to stand as one. The game had changed, and they had won. Not through force, not through deception, but through partnership, freely chosen and fiercely defended. The future stretched before them, full of challenges and opportunities, dangers and discoveries. But they would face it together, as partners, as equals, as two beings who had chosen each other against all odds and built something beautiful from that choice. The stars called, adventure waited, and Ravenna Stormborn and Devlin Cross, once captor and captive, now partners, in every sense that mattered, answered that call as one. Together, always together.